Hi. I'm just sharing this from the Canary, and I have mentioned it before. The UN report into the Tories has just been released, and every voter needs to see it. The UN has released a damning report on the conduct of successive Conservative-led governments. It is overarching, criticising the lack of action in hundreds of areas. These include the child sexual abuse inquiry, hate crime provoked by the British media, child refugees and child poverty. But there's a shocking catch. The Tories are not legally obliged to act on any of it. The UN Human Rights Council, UNHRC, has carried out its periodic review of the UK's commitment to international human rights law. It asked hundreds of campaign groups, charities and organisations to submit evidence, and the complaints made by these bodies are damning. You can read the Canary's full analysis of the evidence submitted to the UN here, and I'll open it in a new tab. Now, the UNHRC has made 227 recommendations. At the time of publication, these were only accessible via the UN extranet, which for registration is required. You can review the report here. And there were overarching criticisms of the government, including that it must do more regarding high-level child sexual abuse, and the CSA inquiry must be completed. The counter-terrorism legislation needs to be altered, as it currently targets individuals or groups based on race, ethnic background or religion. That it must do more in respect of selling arms to countries where they are likely to be used for human rights abuses and violations. The fact that abortion is still illegal in Northern Ireland. Levels of poverty, currently 4 million children, which it must eradicate. That it should consider the revision of the Investigatory Powers Act 2016 with a view to protecting the right to privacy, including by prohibiting mass surveillance activities and the collection of communications data without warrants. That not enough was being done to reduce UK prison population, to improve prisoner safety, or to address increases in prison murders, self-harm and suicide. Recommendations included that the government must put part or all of nearly a dozen pieces of international legislation into law in the UK, including the protection of the rights of the child, migrant workers, people from forced disappearance, decent work for domestic workers, children against sexual abuse, EU legislation. That's these. Okay, they want these implemented. Women and girls against violence. To most, it may be concerning that the UK is not even signed up to some of these laws in the first place. Bad governance? But there were also dozens of specific recommendations which go to the heart of the Tories' governance of the UK. These include that the government must include civil society, the public, more in decision-making processes, specifically the implementation of the UN HRC recommendations. It needs to do more to ensure that British companies are not breaching human rights abroad. A universal basic income must be considered. Life sentences given out to young offenders should be abolished. It needs to review the Immigration Act of 2016, as it may be in breach of international law surrounding children, specifically the detention of child immigrants. There were also a staggering 42 recommendations about the government's approach to hate crime. Specifics included that the government must do more to stop the British media from inciting hate crime. Not enough is being done to counter ethnic profiling of people of African descent. The government still needs to do more to stop the increase of all hate crime and discrimination. Discrimination against same-sex couples in Northern Ireland must end, and same-sex marriage must be made law. the Tories' British Bill of Rights. There were 14 overarching concerns about the Tories' proposed British Bill of Rights, BBR, which will replace the UK's obligations under the European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR. Specifically that the BBR would maintain the same level of protection for the public as the ECHR. European citizens living in the UK would be protected under the BBR. The public should be consulted on the contents of the BBR. So far, the government has either denied or said in essence that work was in progress on all these criticisms. It has until September to report back to the UN. Another day, another UN report. But we've been here before. As the Canary has documented, the UN twice reported on the UK government in 2016, and it found that the Tories had committed grave and systematic violations of disabled people's human rights, while also eroding the rights of single parents, minority communities and the poorest and most vulnerable in society. The Tories' response to both these reports? To simply shrug their shoulders and say they didn't believe them. And because of the way the UN works, the Tories can do this. The UN has no legal power to force the government to act. So once again, it's down to campaigners, opposition politicians and the media to try and force the hand of the Conservatives. Sadly, only one of those three groups of people is likely to do anything meaningful, and it's not the media or the politicians. Governing for whom? May said in her first speech as PM that she would govern not in the interests of the privileged few, but she and her party have never showed any interest in doing so. They stand up for the wealthy while allowing the rest of us to rot. So voters would do well to remember her words on the steps of Downing Street. Think about them in the context of this UN report, and then vote accordingly on the 8th of June. Well, we all know what happened on the 8th of June, don't we? She got in on a rigged election. As usual, they rigged the postal vote. That's my lawful suspicion, okay? And I've got evidence to support my lawful suspicion, including the historical evidence that until 1948, the Tory types in Britain had 1, 2, 3, perhaps even 4 and 5 votes. And people don't realise this. That was their traditional right. Because whatever university they graduated from, they have a right to vote in that constituency, as well as their own constituency. These were the kind of privileges they had. Because then, not many people among the workforce, the average workforce, even made it to college. You know, never mind university. It was only the privileged that went to university. And so whoever went to university, they had 2 votes. They had the vote in their own constituency and a vote in the constituency of the university that they'd graduated from. And that is probably why so many of them used to go, you know, choose to go to universities outside their own constituency catchment areas. They also had an extra vote for any properties that they owned in other constituencies. So if they had a property in a, you know, they could have a property in one constituency, reside in one constituency, and then also have graduated from a university of another constituency. So that's 3 votes, isn't it? And how many more could they have acquired from there for whatever properties they owned here and there? And that's how we can see how that process disenfranchised the voting majority of the workforce of the voting public. Because for every one worker, the Tories could have 3, 4, 5, how many votes? And having money means having the power to pay people to proxy vote for you, to vote as you dictate. So that, you know, as I say. And I think also the fact that we have from the official pundits saying the day before the election that she was going to win by a landslide. That was the day before it was published in The Independent. I've shared it on one of my videos. That was the day before. And obviously they realised from the exit polls, turnout was much, much bigger than was expected. And it was predominantly Labour, because people are that fed up with this government. And I knew that. And I'd actually made a video prior to the election calling these official pollsters out, saying you're a pack of liars. I don't know where you've got your data from, but those polls are totally fake. Those poll results are totally fake. There's absolutely no way she's 20 points ahead. That's what they were saying at the time. She was 20 points ahead of Corbyn. I knew she wasn't. I'm a British person. I know British people. I know what I was picking. I know I've got a good sense of where people are at. Okay? And I knew for a fact there was no way she was 20 points ahead when they were saying she were. And I was thinking, well, why are they saying that? And I did warn people, watch out for another rigged election. Watch out for the postal vote. Because to them, that's their traditional right, you see. They've always believed that they've got a right to have more than one vote. Because they always did have that right. And believe you me, they have taken full advantage of the postal vote. And the fact that they do own second, third, fourth and fifth homes. And even properties abroad. And they do have the power to pay people to vote, to proxy vote for them. And that's why it was a hung parliament. Because of you know, I could be wrong. I hope I am wrong. But I do very strongly feel that if the postal vote was checked, you'd find by majority it was Conservative. And if you check the physical vote, you'll find majority it was Labour. That's my lawful suspicion. Okay? Now, the government, the Tories aren't legally obliged to act on any of this. Okay? All these concerns. And I'll just scroll down. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Sorry. It just seems to have put us on to the same thing. I don't know why that hasn't come up, the other link. But they're not obliged to act on any of it. But we are. We the people. It's up to us to stand up for our rights, to stand up for our human rights, and to stand by the UN report. I know a lot of people won't agree with, you know, the stuff to do with immigration, and there's people who don't agree with abortion. But nobody's got a right to judge anybody, and we need to understand that. Okay? People have a right to make their individual choices for their individual lives, and in a world where women are generally impoverished, have less rights, less respect, and often end up pregnant against their wishes and even in spite of every precaution, then they have a right to an abortion, to choose to terminate a pregnancy. Rather than bring an unwanted child who often even the father isn't prepared to stand by and support that child. Well, why should she bring that child into the world, into the kind of world to suffer, living under rule of tyrants? Okay? Nobody's got any right to be judging people. Is that person a good human being? Are they kind? Are they caring? Are they working hard? Are they a criminal? Are they somebody that abuses people? Well, she's a criminal. Okay, she is. She is a criminal, selling arms to countries where they are likely to be used for human rights abuses and violations, which they have done. They've been selling arms to Saudi Arabia, knowing full well that those arms are being used to kill innocent people in Yemen. It's really disgusting. It is so disgusting. And they've been celebrating, oh, we made, you know, we sold 12 billions worth of arms to Saudi Arabia. Oh, it's been brilliant for British jobs. Really? British people really want the kind of jobs. They want to profit from basically contributing to the death of children. And people who are doing what? Standing up against the criminal Saudi so-called elite. And so it's up to us, the people, to stand up. And I think that is happening. Because they do just govern for the privileged few. And they are criminals. And people have criticised those who have, you know, discussed the political points behind what has happened at Grenfell. Oh, you're politicising a tragedy. What, when it's politics that have created that tragedy in the first place? When that tragedy has happened precisely because we have a government that is so ignorant of our human rights that they're getting ready to scrap them. And that's really all we need to know. Because without human rights, what are we?